number 1 overall pick, 2011 Rookie of the Year, 2015 NFL MVP, led his team to a 15-1 record and a Super Bowl appearance. I remember watching him in his prime, and the things he was doing were just crazy. He led the Panthers to multiple winning seasons and multiple playoff seasons. That player would be Cam Newton, but injuries, man. We all know the shoulder injury that practically ended his career, and to be fair, any major shoulder injury would end many quarterbacks' careers. Just sad to see him go from a top quarterback and one of the most exciting players in the NFL to a guy who's just a shadow of himself and a guy no team wants. Just very sad to see. There are multiple jokes of his play, his hair, but at one point, every NFL fan was dabbing because of him. Hey, what's up guys, it's NFL Times here with another video. This video will overview Cam in his early life and college career, but not as much, as this video is more based on how good Cam was, his injury history, and how badly did his injury affect him. I would also like to see if we could answer 3 questions at the end of the video. Did his 2018 shoulder injury really affect him as much as everyone says? Was he worth the number 1 overall pick? And is he a Panthers legend? Anyways, on to the video. Coming out of high school as a highly recruited athlete, he would commit to Florida where he would beat out fellow freshman quarterback John Brunley to be the backup to Jesus, or some people would also call him Tim Tebow, for 2 years. This is where the troubles began. On November 21st, 2008, Newton would be arrested and charged with felony counts of larceny, burglary, and obstruction of justice following the alleged theft of a laptop. He also... Wait, what? He threw the laptop out of his window when the police showed up. What? Anyways, all charges were dropped after he completed a court-approved program. This incident would get him suspended by a team, and he would announce just 3 days before the Gators won the national championship that he was transferring. He would end up at Blinn College in Brenham, Texas, which is a community college. In his lone year at Blinn, he would throw for 2,800 yards and 22 touchdowns while rushing for 655 yards, leading his team to the NJCAA National Football Championship, which they won. This would get him named the number 1 quarterback from either high school or junior college, being the only 5-star recruit. He would then sign with Auburn. In his only season at Auburn, he would put on a show, throwing for 2,800 yards, 30 touchdowns with only 7 interceptions. Now, these stats are actually pretty good by themselves, but then you add his 1,400 rushing yards and 20 rushing touchdowns to the mix, and you have a monster season by Cam. He would lead his team to the national championship game, beating Oregon 22-19. He would go on to win the Heisman this year in a landslide victory. More problems would pop up while Newton was at Auburn though. Newton's dad, Cecil Newton, saw from $120,000 to $180,000 for Cam to sign with Mississippi State instead of Auburn, which is clearly against NCAA rules. Cam would be declared ineligible on the 30th of November, but Auburn would immediately file to have him reinstated as long as Cam Newton did not know of his father's doings, and Kenny Rogers could not be considered an agent. Oh, I forgot to mention, Kenny Rogers was the other guy who was in it with Cam in the little deal they had. He would be reinstated the very next day, and Cam would go on to win the national championship game. After 13 months, NCAA informed Auburn that it found no major violations and were good to go. And now after all of that, Newton would forego his senior year and declare for the 2011 NFL Draft. Cam Newton would be selected first overall by the Carolina Panthers, which would make many experts wonder if he would be worth it. He would shut everyone up by winning Offensive Rookie of the Year and passing for more than 4,000 yards. This was his only 4,000-yard season, by the way, and 21 touchdowns, while also rushing for just over 700 yards and 14 touchdowns. Although he barely threw for more touchdowns than interceptions, having 17 picks, you have to remember that this was a Panthers team that had only managed to win 2 games the season prior. And even with Cam leading the Panthers to the 5th highest scoring offense, his defense would end up as the 27th scoring defense, and they would finish 6-10. The offense would regress a little bit the next year, Cam still putting up great numbers with 3,800 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 700 rushing yards, and 8 rushing touchdowns with 12 interceptions. Good news, the defense would improve from 27 to 18 in points allowed. Bad news, the Panthers were still in search for their first winning season with Cam at quarterback, as they would end up going 7-9. Cam would not only get his first winning season with the Panthers, but his first NFC South crown and a 12-4 record in a first-round bye the very next year. Surprisingly, it was a defense that kind of carried this team, being second in scoring and yards allowed, well, only behind 2. You know, these guys. Yeah, they're kind of good. Anyways, Cam had another good year with 3,300 yards with 24 touchdowns and 13 picks, while also rushing for 585 yards and 6 touchdowns. Unfortunately, in the divisional game, Cam's first playoff game, he would go on to lose to the 49ers. Next year, in my opinion, was Cam's worst year in Carolina, but where he started for most of the games anyways. 5-8-1 record, 3,100 yards, 18 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, while rushing for 539 yards and 5 touchdowns. Not the best, but also this season is where Cam would start getting some injuries, but they weren't anything too severe at this point. He would suffer a hairline rib fracture that ruled him out of the season opener, and then would fracture his lower back in a car accident that forced him to miss another game. With 7 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie, the Panthers somehow won the division and snuck into the playoffs. But funny enough, this season would also be responsible for Cam's first playoff win, where they would beat the Cardinals 27-16 in the wildcard round, right before losing to the Seahawks in the divisional round. Then there was the 2015 season, and in my opinion the best season in Panthers history, where they would win their first 14 games before losing the undefeated season to the Falcons, and they would end up 15-1. Cam would put up 3,800 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, rush for 600 yards and 10 touchdowns, and with the season the Panthers had, along with the numbers Cam was putting up, he would go on to be named NFL MVP. They would hold off a Seahawks comeback and barely scrape by with a 31-24 win in the divisional game. And after destroying the Cardinals in the conference championship game, they would head on to Super Bowl 50, where they would face the Denver Broncos. We all know what happened next. He became Von Miller's son. Now, all jokes aside, the Denver defense just destroyed the Panthers, and the Broncos would go on to win their 3rd Lombardi trophy. To be fair though, the Panthers had their chances to win the game. The Broncos had a whopping 11 first downs and 194 total yards. Cam getting stripped twice and throwing an interception made the game one-sided though. It also doesn't help that Mike Tolbert, the Panthers running back, also lost a fumble. Cam would infamously walk out of the post-game press conference and would be criticized, of course. But to be honest, I kind of understand them, but kind of not. It's kind of a 50-50 thing. Anyways, in 2016, coming off from his MVP season, he would suffer a concussion in week 4, which would knock him out of the game and the very next one as well. And then later on in the season, he would partially tear the rotator cuff in his right shoulder, which of course limited his game. He would finish out the season with 3,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions, but he would barely manage to have 359 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. In the very next season, after the Panthers went 15-1, the Panthers would rack up double-digit losses, going 6-10 in 2016. This is where things would start going down in Nguyen's career. Although the Panthers would have a 11-5 season and make it to the playoffs, this is where injuries would start to slow him down. He would play all 16 games and would throw for 3,300 yards, 22 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and would rush for 754 yards and 6 touchdowns. A pretty good year, but in the wildcard matchup against the Saints, Cam would suffer ligament and cartilage damage, which would be a big reason why the Panthers would go on to lose the game 31-26. But he would choose to not have surgery and he would play through the injury till the final 2 weeks of the next season. And to be honest, it didn't seem like it affected them much. In the 2018 season, sitting at 6-2, 9 weeks in, it was looking nice for the Panthers. But in the Week 10 matchup, they would face the Pittsburgh Steelers, and of course, a lot of people remember what happened during the game. Steelers linebacker TJ Watt would have a nasty hit on Cam. It would go on to be determined later on that Cam suffered a shoulder injury that affected him for the rest of the year, and if I'm being honest, the rest of his career. After starting 6-2, the Panthers would lose 7 out of their last 8 games, including a 7-game losing streak. If you paid any attention to the first half of the season and the second half of the season, you can tell that Cam did not look like himself after the hit, especially on deep throws. Everyone, even the Panthers, could tell that something was off about him. And in January of 2019, he would receive shoulder surgery on the same shoulder he had done in 2017. But that surgery was way less complex and severe at that time. Now, shoulder injuries for quarterbacks could be career-ending, but many believe Cam would come back and still perform at a very high level. Heading into the 2019 season, well, actually the preseason, in Nguyen's 3rd preseason game, he sprained his left foot, and then in week 2 of the 2019 season, he re-aggravated the injury. It would be determined later on that he suffered a Lisfranc injury. His recovery would take longer than expected, and in November of 2019, the Panthers would place Nguyen on injured reserve. And later on in that year, in December, Cam would have surgery to fix the issue, which would make him miss the entire 2019 season besides the first 2 weeks. Now, after the 2019 season, the Panthers would get rid of Ron Rivera, who was the only coach Cam had in his entire career with the Panthers, and they would bring in Matt Rhule. And then in March of 2020, the Panthers would announce that they mutually agreed with Nguyen to open trade talks with other NFL teams, but according to Nguyen, that news was false. Then the Panthers would sign quarterbacks Teddy Bridgewater and PJ Walker, making Cam's exit from Carolina a matter of when and not if. And then after months and months, and the same month they would bring in Teddy Walker, the Panthers would release Cam Newton. In my opinion, he deserves a way better exit than the one the Panthers gave him, but it is what it is. In June of 2020, Newton would sign with the Patriots, and after a disappointing 2020 season, where rookie quarterback Mac Jones was teaching Cam the playbook, yes, you heard me correctly, he would only throw for 2,600 yards and 8 touchdowns with 10 picks, 592 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns, and then he would leave the Patriots after his one season stay. And then in the 2021 season, after Sam Darnold got injured, Cam would sign with the Panthers once again and would actually get 2 touchdowns in his very first 2 plays as a Panther again. That's where all the good once again went bad. He would just suck the next 5 games, losing every single one of them, and then would get replaced by Sam Darnold, who came back from injury. And that's that. Cam is currently without a team and just vibing. Now let's go back to the questions I wanted to try to answer at the start of the video. Was Cam's 2018 shoulder injury as bad as everyone makes it out to be? Well, the Panthers were 6-2 before the injury and 1-7 after it. Cam reportedly said that he couldn't throw more than 30 yards downfield due to injury, and anyone who watched him play after the injury, you can tell something was off. If you don't want to believe me, well, here's some stats. Out of Cam's 471 pass attempts in 2018, only 13 were thrown at least 30 yards downfield, which works out to a rate of just 2.8%. And this here is compared to the previous 3 seasons. And out of those 13 passes, not a single one was completed. And then if you look at Cam's season with the Patriots, he was just awful. So the answer to a question, in my opinion, is yes. I do think the injury maybe not entirely ended his career, but it did make a huge impact on his career. Big enough of an impact to where Cam never looked the same after that. Now, was he worth to be the first overall pick in the draft? To be a first round pick, you have to be really, really good. However, to be a first overall pick in a draft, you have to be extraordinary. Now, we also have to look at this through multiple perspectives. Was he an all-time great number 1 overall pick? No. But was he a bad one? No. Number 1 overall picks should be game-changing, franchise-changing players. Now, considering the Panthers franchise was not even 20 years old at the time they drafted Newton, and the year prior only went 2-14, I would say yes, he was worth it. Now, if any big franchise like the Steelers or Niners would have drafted him, and he would have done the same thing he did in Carolina, he wouldn't have been considered a great number 1 overall pick, but just a good one. But once again, considering the Panthers were only 16 years old at the time, you have to say for a young franchise, Cam Newton was absolutely worth it. Now on to the last question. Is he a Carolina Panthers legend? Absolutely. Before Newton joined, the Panthers had a total of 3 division titles. Newton helped the Panthers win 3 straight division titles. Newton has the most wins as a Panthers quarterback in franchise history, the most yards and touchdowns in franchise history. He managed to take the Panthers to multiple winning seasons and playoff seasons and a Super Bowl, which if it wasn't for one of the best defenses in NFL history and in recent memory, there was a good chance he would have won it. So in my opinion, yes, he is absolutely a Panther legend. And that is all. Cam's rise to the top, fall to the bottom, and everything in between. I would like to know y'all's opinions on these questions. Do y'all think the injury really affected him that bad? Was he a good number 1 overall pick? And is he a Panthers legend? I would love to hear what you all have to say about these questions, so let me know down in the comments. Drop a like and subscribe while you're at it. Thank you all for watching. Have a nice day or night. Take care and peace out.